So welcome. Today is Thursday, February 20th. I'm Brian LaPasse, Chief of Program Services for OPSC. With me today, facilitating the meeting is Joshua Potter. He's our Operations Manager in Program Services. Josh and I are going to be facilitating, and we're going to be helping out with questions after each presentation. We only have two topics today, which is a little bit different than last week. They're two very interesting topics, though, and while they're not Prop 2 related, they're interesting things that we've been developing for quite a long time. Uh, I think I can speak for everyone. I know I'm eager to get them out there and present them to everybody. I think we all are. Um, and there's some really interesting developments that we have to share. And I think we've even had, in fact, I know we've had quite a bit of experience with them already. So I think we have some really good developed ideas with some real world experience mixed in there. The first one that we're going to be talking about, Maria Faust, is going to be presenting an outline and details on how second round modernization funding and eligibility works. Many of you have already had some applications come through the office using second round mod, but we're excited to present to you today more of a holistic view on the subject and just kind of cover it from top to bottom, all the way how the grants are going to be returned to how the funding may or may not be used. After that, Nicholas Sutton is going to be presenting um, incorporating transitional kindergarten into its own grade level on the 5001 for purposes of enrollment projections. As most of you know, TK enrollment is currently reported alongside kindergarten, reported together. We're looking at options now for making it its own grade level and possibly be reported separately. That's one that we've been working on for a really long time, so I'm anxious to get that one going. Got a lot of really good ideas, and like I said, we've had some real world experience on them. So, um, looking forward to some comments and a lot of feedback from all of you. Like I always say, that's how we get to the best place on these rules and kind of our policies and approach to these items and these topics. So, the more input we can get, the better. Looking forward to lots of good questions and discussion today. So, without further ado, I'll be turning it over to Maria, and she's going to be presenting second round modernization.
Right, let's get this shared. One moment. Okay, everyone see my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning, and thank you to everyone who has joined us for this meeting. As mentioned, today we will be providing clarity on the statute and OPSC regulations that allow for a district to gain modernization eligibility a second time, and how the funding that uses that eligibility will be applied by the district. A second round of modernization eligibility is the result of changes in statute, which is based on portable classrooms and permanent buildings that generated eligibility, were provided an apportionment, and have become eligible for an apportionment again. A second apportionment is available for portable classrooms every 20 years and permanent buildings every 25 years after the date of initial apportionment. Prior to the amendment, OPSC allowed for a modernization apportionment for buildings that had reached 20 or 25 years of age. However, with the changes, a building that has already received state funding for modernization has the ability to receive a second apportionment for additional modernization if it has progressed past 20 or 25 years from the initial SFP apportionment. The amendments also included stipulations for what the subsequent apportionment funds would need to be used for. Portable classrooms generating eligibility for a second time must either be replaced with another classroom or taken out of classroom use. If the district chooses to keep the portable classroom, the district must show the modernizing of it is a better use of public resources, which will be discussed later in this item. These conditions are only pertaining to portable classrooms and do not apply to permanent buildings. It is important to note that the eligibility generated from portable classrooms must be used to replace those classrooms with classrooms or be used to modernize them. However, the eligibility generated from permanent buildings may be used throughout the campus. Once eligibility for a second time is determined, the eligibility generated will be made available for the district to utilize on an eligible modernization project. provided that the project meets all other program requirements. To better understand what generating eligibility is and how a district may use that eligibility to fund projects, we will briefly look at how the SFP program works and what processing guidelines OPSC currently uses. To be able to request funding for modernization, a district must first establish a site's eligibility within the SFP program. Modernization eligibility is site-specific. This means that all eligibility generated will be based on the age and type of buildings on campus and the age and number of pupils in attendance. Once established, the site's eligibility is locked into a snapshot of the campus during the year it was established, regardless of any changes made to buildings or facilities afterwards. To be considered eligible for funding, a portable classroom must be at least 20 years of age and a permanent building must be at least 25 years of age. To apply for eligibility within the SFP program, a district needs to submit an eligibility determination form SAB 5003. There are two options on the SAB 5003 a district may choose from to calculate its modernization eligibility by grade category. Option A will use the lesser of enrollment and the capacity of classrooms of age. Option B uses the percentage of classrooms or all buildings square footage of age and applies that percentage to the enrollment within each grade category. A district may choose whichever option results in the highest or more advantageous eligibility for the site. As more facilities or classrooms start to come of age, the district has the option to update their eligibility using the Form SAB 5003. Once all facilities or classrooms on a campus are 20 or 25 years of age, the district is only able to update their eligibility through enrollment increases. However, with the changes in statute, districts are able to obtain a second round of eligibility for those classrooms or buildings that have reached the additional 20 or 25 years of age. Once the eligibility baseline has been established, the district can draw upon the eligibility to fund modernization projects on campus. To request funding within the SFP, an application for funding form SAB 5004 must be submitted. The funding available is based on the dollar amount that is given on a per pupil basis, also known as pupil grants. The grants for modernization projects need to be used to fund improvements on campus, which will extend the useful life of the school. However, modernization funds cannot be used on additional square footage or additional classrooms to the campus. Statutory amendments modified this eligibility and funding process by changing the number of times modernization of a building can be funded with state dollars. Education codes 17073.15 and 17074.10F dictate the specific circumstances from statutory authority for how modernization funds available a second time may be used by districts. OPSC has drafted this item for the purposes of opening discussion with districts on how implementation of the amended regulations will be accomplished. Now we will look at the approach for how OPSC will review a subsequent apportionment for modernization. The option that the district used on the Form SAB 5003 during the initial apportionment will dictate the grants that are to be returned for the second round. Like previously said, option A and option B on the Form SAB 5003 are based on either the lesser of classroom capacity or enrollment or the percentage of classrooms or square footage of age applied to the enrollment total. If a district has not separated the site's special day class or SDC from the general K-12 enrollment, this will need to be done prior to requesting a second apportionment. This is so that the grade categories a district will be receiving eligibility for a second time are correctly distributed, accounting for any non-severe or severe SDC classrooms on campus. When considering the calculation, a second round eligibility, once all the grade levels are correctly separated, OPSC will determine the number of pupil grants to be returned using three potential circumstances. Circumstance 1 covers projects that require a proration when not all the facilities that were eligible during the initial apportionment are eligible during the second funding request. The second circumstance covers projects with portable classrooms only. And circumstance 3 covers projects that had eligibility generated by permanent buildings only. These circumstances have been made into the following scenarios on pages 5 through 7. Scenario 1 shows an example of a first apportionment that includes both portable and permanent classrooms. This K-6 school has 700 students, and the district chose option A on the Form SAB 5003 during establishment. During the initial apportionment, there were 10 portable classrooms and 10 permanent classrooms eligible, which resulted in 500 K-6 pupil grants approved on April 6, 1999. The district then requested all 500 grants on the Form SAB 5004, which was apportioned on May 26, 1999. The May date is what the second round of apportionment will be dependent upon, and the district used it to determine if the classrooms had reached 20 or 25 years past this date. The district then submitted an application on July 1st, 2019, which requested a second round for the 10 portables that had reached another 20 years of age past the original apportionment. However, the 10 permanent classrooms that were eligible in 1999 have not reached the additional required 25 years of age, and therefore a proration is needed to be used for what is eligible and what is not eligible in 2019. An adjustment was then calculated based on the percentage of portable classrooms eligible for an additional apportionment compared to the total eligible classrooms at the initial apportionment. This percentage was multiplied by the pupil grants funded in 1999. And please note whether the district chooses option A or option B in this example, utilizing square footage, the same calculation method would apply. The below table shows a breakdown of how pupil grants will be returned to the baseline. We have the 500 K-6 pupil grants requested in the initial apportionment. We have the 10 portable classrooms and 10 permanent classrooms that were eligible at that time. And then that percentage, the 50%, and the 50% is applied to the 250%. 250, or the 50%. 250 pupil grants will be made available to fund the replacement for the 10 portable classrooms eligible in 2019. And the 250 pupil grants will be made available once those permanent classrooms are eligible in 2024. So the portable classrooms are eligible in 2019 during the funding request, and the permanent classrooms will be eligible in 2024. Scenarios 2 and 3 are examples based on the same data as in the first scenario, but instead these projects either contain all portable classrooms or all permanent classrooms. If the district is doing work on the specific classroom or buildings generating the eligibility, then the district would receive in these examples the total pupil grants back that they were given at the initial apportionment to use on the application if they are eligible during that date, 2019. As these are portable classrooms, they are all eligible. And these classrooms are all eligible in 2024. Scenario 4 describes a situation in which the district has some second round eligibility generated, though a portion of the portables do not meet the statutory requirements in 2019 or 2024, I'm sorry. This site has grade levels K-6 and 7-8 and had 10 portable and 10 permanent classrooms eligible during establishment. The district used all grants that were available during the initial apportionment, all 300 K-6 and 200 7-8, and is now seeking a second round of funding. However, only 6 of the 10 portables that were eligible in 1999 meet the statutory requirements of portables. Because of this, a proration of the eligible portable classrooms with the original total eligible classrooms would need to be done. The district would then be able to only use the portion of pupil grants generated by the eligible portable classrooms, and the remaining eligibility would be made available once the statutory requirements had been met. As you can see in the chart, the portables from grade level 7-8 do not meet the requirements, and the 100 pupil grants they generated will be made available at the time that they are met. Now we will look at the funding requirements for second round eligibility. When OPSC is processing an application for a second round of modernization funding with a project scope that is including work on the portable that is another 20 years of age, the work will need to include either the portable's removal from use or the demolition and replacement of that portable. If a district chooses not to demolish and replace, then the district must show evidence that modernizing the portable is a better use of public resources. If a district chooses to remove and replace an eligible portable, the following 3 scenarios will dictate the availability and use of second round funds. Scenario 1 includes 3 circumstances for if the portable had been removed prior to the project requesting second round funds. In the first circumstance, the portable classroom that is eligible has already been removed prior to the application submittal. If the removal of the portable was locally funded, a district may replace that portable with another classroom in an SFP-funded project by submitting a certification indicating that the portable was removed but not yet replaced. The district may then use the eligibility of the previously removed portable as a part of like-kind replacement of the classroom only and not of square footage. In the second circumstance, the portable that is eligible has already been removed within a previous new construction project as a part of the district's excluded portables. In this circumstance, state funds have already been used to replace the portable, and therefore the portable is not eligible for second round funding. In the third circumstance, the portable classroom that is eligible has already been removed and replaced as a part of like kind in a modernization project and will not be eligible for second round funding. However, if the portable classroom was not replaced and indicated as a net loss to the site instead, then the district can request second round funding to replace the portable classroom in a project as a part of like kind replacement. Scenario 2 will occur when a portable is being removed and replaced within the current SFP project. Like previously said, the district may use second round funds only if the removal and replacement or modernization of the portable that is eligible is included in the project scope. A proration will be applied if only a portion of the portables that are eligible are included in the project scope. The eligibility generated from the rest of the portables that are not included will be available for a future project that includes work on those portables, but will not be available at the time of application if they are not eligible at. And finally, in scenario 3, the portable will be removed after the application that is requesting second round funds is processed, in which case the district will need to submit documentation showing that the portable was removed within 6 months of the filing of notice of completion to OPSC. Now, if a district chooses to retain and continue to modernize a portable, statute gives parameters for when this is permissible. The parameters include a cost-benefit analysis prepared by a licensed design professional, a narrative which supports the decision to modernize that portable, which can include maintenance records or pictures, school board minutes, which show a discussion by the board and community members agreeing that modernization would be a better use of resources. These minutes will need to include a detailed explanation as well. And lastly, the district can provide other evidence that they deem reliable to the state allocation board for review. If the district is unable to satisfy the requirements of better use, then the portable will need to be replaced to receive second round funding. As previously mentioned, if only a portion of the portables that are eligible are included in the project scope of a current application, then the pupil grants generated by the remaining portables will be available to be used in a project that has those portables included in the scope of work. Thank you all for being here for this presentation. We will now open for discussion and any questions.
Thank you, Maria. Yeah, this is a great topic. Marie did a great job of outlining it, but there are definitely some nuances here, and it's a very technical item, I would say. So, looking forward to some questions. I think the first one, Michael Gold is asking on page 10, how is like kind defined?
Yeah, good morning. It's Joshua Potter, Operations Manager with OPSC. I can take that question. With SFP regulations, section 1859.79.2, use of modernization funds, actually identifies that the modernization grant may not be used for the following, which would include the new building area with exception of replacement building area of like kind. That is our use of the definition of like kind. So again, it would be that concept of using the modernization funding to replace existing square footage of like kind.
Thanks for that, Josh. Lori, you have a question.
Yes, good morning. So it's my understanding that the only real item that's being discussed with the second round modernization is that the portables would require specific scope of work in order to be eligible. I mean, it's not affecting anything else under the modernization program, but other than just the portables.
In general, that is correct. Again, looking at some of the statutory references that are included in the authority attachment of the item, specifically for the eligibility, so the grants that are being returned, the calculation that Maria had covered in the presentation is pursuant to Education Code 17073.15A, which does identify that the grants could be returned after the 20 or 25 years respective of the type of construction from the prior apportionment. The discussion on the actual funding and how that is applied is again included in Education Code section 17074.10F, which actually includes specific language prescribed that identifies that the board shall require that the school district use the modernization funds to replace the portable classroom. Only portables are called out as having to have the modernization funding used to do the replacement there, again, with the absence of a demonstrated better use of state resources.
Got it. And so that was that education code that you just referenced, that was already in statute, or was that a new requirement under Prop 2?
That was already in statute. References that were made during the presentation of the change to the statutory authority was actually historic changes when the additional apportionment was provided in the statute. And I do believe it was in approximately 2003. I don't have that listed in front of me, but I believe that's what is contained in the item.
Yeah, I think that's
Okay.
right.
I have one last question. When you have a modernization funding request or eligibility adjustment when it's enrollment only, not based on additional buildings becoming of age, and a district applies for a modernization funding application, which was just based off of enrollment increases only, does that change the time of when the second round becomes eligible? Or is it just solely based off the physical age of the buildings on the baseline?
So for the additional apportionment, specifically because the statute actually does prescribe that it would be, the eligibility would be returned. So again, could be utilized from the 20 or 25 years from the apportionment. The calculation is then based upon the 5003 that immediately preceded when that apportionment was provided.
Yeah.
So there's no distinction between the adjustment being enrollment only or based on buildings becoming of age.
Correct. Yeah, they're separate transactions. Yeah. The amount that's being returned is like Josh said, based off of 5003, and then the amount of grants that were requested in the funding app that's aged up 20 years or 25 years.
Great. Thank you for clarifying.
Great questions. Thank you, Lori. Okay, we have a question from Rachel. If a portable was previously replaced with district funds prior to eligibility date of those portables, then they are not eligible to get reimbursed for those, correct? I don't think that's correct.
That is not correct. That would be eligible provided that that scope of work is added into the funding application as requested. In that example, since the district locally funded that project, that scope of work could be applied to the application being processed. Again, this would be in alignment with Education Code 17074.10F, where it specifically states that the board shall require that the school district use the modernization funds, hence the funding application, to do the replacement of that portable classroom.
Yeah. So there's still a way to pull it off as long as you have the right scope in the plans. Next question from Bailey. if we are using the original eligibility from the 5003 from 25 years ago, what if we did not break out the special day SPED numbers on that form from 1999? What if we do not have the information to update the form? My understanding is that an SDC adjustment would take place prior to doing any updates. Whether it's a second round modernization or just a standard, seabeds or enrollment or facilities update, we always break out the SDC information. We have run across it several times where that information isn't readily available, but that we need it in order to make that adjustment. So I think the district would need to do the best they can to pull numbers. I know that's 25 years ago in some cases, but we would need to do the best we can to locate that and use that information to break out the SDC kids. Steve has a question. If a site has current eligibility and then has permanent buildings become eligible for second round funding, will the pupils be added to the current eligibility? I think what you're asking is so what we're going to do about kind of behind the scenes is sketch out a schedule of when grants will be returning based off of funding activity that's occurred prior, but we won't actually add the pupils back into the baseline until that date comes up. We'll make notes. So like you can do the same thing. If you're looking at a district's baseline for a site, you can look at when those applications were funded, and whatever the apportionment date was is when, that's the trigger for the new 20 or 25 year second round mod. And so that's kind of what we'll be doing, and we'll be adding them back as they become of age. I hope that answers your.
Yeah, to add on to that, and again, just to make sure that we're understanding the question there, Steve, thank you again for providing that. If the eligibility baseline has a positive number currently, and additional facilities come back eligible for an additional apportionment, those would be added to the existing baseline. They don't replace it, or they don't get added or omitted just because there is already an existing eligibility. Because again, keep in mind the eligibility that's remaining, in theory, would have been eligibility generated outside of the prior funded project. That's your remaining baseline. So they would be compounded and added together.
Yeah, another great question. Shar says, how is eligibility recalculated if a mod? How is eligibility recalculated if in a mod all portables were replaced with a new permanent building? The new permanent building is now 25 years old. Is eligibility still recalculated based on the buildings that were on campus when snapshot eligibility was established? This is an issue that I think is a little bit newer to us. We don't address this in the item. And so we were actually talking about this just before the meeting today. And I think it's something that we need to do a little bit more homework on. We hadn't incorporated that into our item. I don't want to speculate on what our answer might or might not be on that. And so I think what we will do is that's a really great question, Shar, and very astute. You're right on track with what we were thinking about this morning. So I'm not sure why it didn't come up until now, but we'll definitely address that, and we'll tease that out at the next meeting. When we bring this topic back, we'll make sure that that's one of our prominent subjects that we'll be discussing.
Thank you.
Sure. Let's see. Next question from Scott. For financial hardship districts that receive a design apportionment but do not move forward with a full and final grant, is the design apportionment the trigger date?
Making sure I understand this correctly, in this case, you do indicate that the application did not move forward from the design apportionment to the full funding, meaning in that case that maybe an RCI was done or a full rescission if none of the funds were expended. If a rescission was done and none of the funds were expended, all pupil grants would be returned to the district's baseline. And in that case, no facilities were modernized, and therefore there would not actually be any eligibility for an additional apportionment. RCI in theory would be the same way. You're looking at a design apportionment in which no facilities were modernized. In that correlation, there would not actually be a date to reset that. In a larger format, we are looking at the apportionment date in which the facilities were modernized in order to become eligible for an additional apportionment, and therefore we'd be looking at the full apportionment, not the design.
Any other questions out there? I'm going to give it a minute because this is a really complicated topic.
Brian, we have a question down here.
Perfect. Timing.
Hi, good morning. This is Jessica Love with Hancock Park and DeLong. I've got a few questions. First one for if a district is wanting to replace the classroom, but they don't need the classroom space anymore, do you have any accommodations for districts that are going to be replacing it for something else that's better suited for their site? Does it have to be a classroom?
Based on the language, again, that's included in statute and what we are hoping to kind of go through with the purpose of today's meeting for the discussions, the language in, again, 17074.10 specifically says that it must be used, the funding must be used to replace the portable classrooms. Again, it does specify the actual classroom usage, and therefore, as of right now, OPSC's policy on some of the applications we have processed has been requiring that classroom. We are open to those discussions and points, and definitely thank you for bringing that question forward.
Okay. And then the next question is, what if the eligibility, the 5003 was using option B, square footage, and the portable area in question was not a classroom? What if it was a teacher's lounge or a restroom? So in that case, it's not replacing the classroom, but it's still generating the eligibility?
Ancillary portable space does not have any statutory requirement to be replaced with a permanent or actually replaced in that specific functional usage. So the ancillary space in OPSC's interpretation is open to that. There is no statutory requirement to do the replacement of that modernization within that funding. Additional modernization could be still utilized as well instead of replacing that square footage.
Okay, so they could use the second round mod that's generated by that square footage for whatever they want?
There is no stipulation guidelines on any other portable space or even the permanent space outside of the portable classroom specifically called out.
Okay. And then last question, you mentioned a few times that the replacement must be a permanent classroom, and I don't see anywhere in the authority in the ed code or the regs where it says it has to be permanent.
It does not need to be permanent. I do apologize if I misspoke on that. It's actually just of like kind, and which we do not dictate whether that's the permanent or portable. I would note that as we are moving through some of the Proposition 2 requirements, there is some stipulations of permanent requirements, but that is not in the purpose of the additional apportionment for modernization.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jessica.
That was my question.
Kevin Sullivan has an interesting question. He said, so RCI grants can't ever come back.
We would definitely have to look at that one. Kevin, thank you for bringing that up. We had discussed specifically the rescissions in the circumstance of when the district did not move forward. We will definitely look at the specifics of the RCI grants and come back in that, bring that back to the next item. Thank you again for bringing that up.
Great question. Yeah, we'll make sure and incorporate that into our bring back item. Okay, anybody else? I'm not seeing any more hands or comments at the moment. Oh, Heather asks, are school districts who are long-term leasing a school facility eligible to receive funding under the hardship program? Is there a minimum number of years required to be eligible to receive funding? Districts who are long-term leasing a school facility eligible to receive funding under the hardship program. So if you're leasing a facility, say it's a portable or even a permanent building, if those are in place at the time that you establish your eligibility, the snapshot at the site, they would be included unless there's some sort of exemption that we can't count them for. But if they're counted in your snapshot, they'll stay there. I'm not quite sure. So Heather, if you add facilities after the snapshot to your school site, those are not reflected on the baseline or in the snapshot for that site. So they're accounted for in other ways. So if that's what you're asking, I guess it kind of depends on the timing of it, is what I would say.
There are provisions within the school facility program, both in statute and regulations, that speak to leased facilities and the requirements therein. For nearly all of the state allocation board administered programs, there is some room for leased facilities and sites. we'd be more than happy to discuss that kind of offline in the least circumstance, specifically regarding the hardship application you may be seeking.
Yeah. Thank you. And to answer Amy's question, I should have caveated this when I mentioned it. RCI stands for reduced to cost incurred. So if there's an application that comes in and then it ends up not moving forward, what we do is it's called reducing the project to cost incurred. And you essentially close the project out, report your expenditures, and then any prorated amount of eligibility that wasn't used in those expenditures is returned to the baseline. Let's see. Bailey asks, in the case of increased enrollment at a site, will we file a new 5003? Would that still be considered second round? Increased enrollment, yes, you do file a new 5003. And if it's only for, if there's nothing else happening, you're just getting increased enrollment, that's totally fine. We see that all the time. And actually you have to file one in order to lock that enrollment in. That's separate from second round funding though. It would be a separate transaction and we would just do the enrollment adjustment, and then the second round would kind of have its own process.
Yes, additional apportionments are specifically tied to a prior apportionment that had to have been awarded. It is not for the facilities updates that are submitted and or CBEDS updates submitted discretionally.
Yeah. April asks, a district has removed portables eligible for second round mod, but is in declining enrollment and chooses not to replace those portables at that time. Will that second round modernization eligibility live on the baseline and be inaccessible until the time the district chooses to construct like-for-like replacement classrooms sometime in the future?
That question does go back, kind of is similar to one of the other questions previously asked, and even one of the scenarios provided in the presentation. In that event, because again, when we look at the language provided in education code, it does say that the modernization funds shall be used to replace those classrooms. And therefore, when we are specifically talking about the portable facilities, there is a requirement to have that replacement in there. Again, as mentioned in a prior comment, when it comes to the ancillary portable space or the permanent space, there are none of those stipulations. And so those people grants that are returned as additional apportionment eligibility are free to be used under the conventional mod process.
Thank you. Steve asked, if a district missed a second round funding for perm year in 2023, can the district reapply for second round funding in 2025? Yeah, you don't have to apply the year it becomes eligible, but those grants would be available to you at such time you do apply. So whenever you're coming in for a funding application and you have second round eligibility waiting, that's when it'll be triggered, and we'll make an update for it. See. Anyone else? Okay, I'm going to try to move on here. I checked, and the item said that we're going to receive written feedback until March 7th. So you have a couple weeks to think about anything that's that has maybe occurred to you today, or maybe when you're on a walk with your dog tomorrow or this weekend, you might think about something and send it in. We welcome all those comments, and we'll make sure to incorporate all the feedback we get into our next item. So please don't be shy about sending in comments. I am going to now share my screen, and Nicholas Sutton is going to present the next topic, which is on transitional kindergarten pupils. Give me 1 second here. There we go. All right, Nick.
All right. Thank you, Brian. Good morning, everyone. I hope you all are doing well. Again, as Brian mentioned, my name is Nicholas Sutton, and I'm here today to discuss the impact of reporting transitional kindergarten in current enrollment projections as its own grade category, and to present proposed amendments to the enrollment certification projection form SAB 5001. So Senate Bill 1381 created a statewide kindergarten level of education that was meant to be the bridge between preschool and kindergarten. And Assembly Bill 130 provided families with the opportunity to enroll their children earlier in transitional kindergarten with age expansion. And those are discussed a little bit further down in the background section there. Since passage of these bills, we have been analyzing how to best incorporate the transitional kindergarten the Form SAP 5001 projections, so that the program can more accurately account for transitional kindergarten enrollment. Currently, transitional kindergarten enrollment has a direct impact on enrollment projections, and their enrollment is combined with kindergarten enrollment when being reported on the Form SAP 5001. Kindergarten enrollment uses a linear weighted average independent from grades 1 through 12, and the cohort survival method is used for grades 1 through 12. And this is further discussed in the staff analysis section here of our item. With the variance in transitional kindergarten participation across school districts, it appears that transitional kindergarten and kindergarten enrollments should be reported separately to more accurately project enrollment and housing needs for school districts. Reporting and projecting transitional kindergarten enrollment separately from kindergarten enrollment will lessen the impacts of fluctuating transitional kindergarten enrollment on other grade levels, and it will also account for the school district's needs to house their transitional kindergarten pupils. So we have tested, and we're going to scroll down a bit of a ways here through the topic of and basically the math behind exactly how we currently do our process. And we have tested several methodologies, including that method as well, where transitional kindergarten enrollment is now separated from kindergarten enrollment and either reported separately as its own in Part A of the Form SAP 5001, or is distinctly recorded in a transitional kindergarten only dedicated section of the form. So for these tests, and this I believe starts on stamp pages, let's see here, starts on stamp pages 9 at the bottom there with option 1. We have developed several methodologies where these transitional kindergarten enrollment is separated, and have developed 6 options to incorporate transitional kindergarten enrollment independently from kindergarten enrollment. So here's a brief overview of each of those 6 options that we have proposed here. So option 1 will go and insert a new row before the kindergarten grade level in Part A of the Form SAP 5001, and it will capture transitional kindergarten enrollment. For option 1, the actual transitional kindergarten enrollment data is used, and the transitional kindergarten enrollment is isolated from the kindergarten through 12th grade projection. Kindergarten through 12th grade enrollment is projected in the same manner as it's currently projected on the Form SAP 5001. This results in a similar range overall, and it removes the impacts that transitional kindergarten enrollment has on the kindergarten through 12th grade projections by being combined with kindergarten enrollment. So I'll have Brian share his screen right here, where it kind of shows a little bit of the math behind option 1, as well as the pros and cons there. All right, and then for option 2, it is like option 1 in the sense that we're going to insert a new row before the kindergarten grade level in Part A of the Form SAP 5001 to capture transitional kindergarten enrollment. This option will also go and use the actual transitional kindergarten enrollment data. The only difference is, unlike option 1, option 2 will apply the current kindergarten linear weighted average calculation for transitional kindergarten only. So with option 2, kindergarten and grades 1 through 12 will follow the cohort survival method. And I'll have Brian share sort of the data behind it, as well as the pros and cons for you all to see. Right, and then for option 3, it is similar to options 1 and 2 in the sense that we're going to insert a new row for, before kindergarten grade level in Part A of the Form SAP 5001 to capture that that transitional kindergarten enrollment. And option 3 is similar to option 1 in this sense, in how it's projected enrollment forward. It projects that forward. However, the main difference between this option, option 3, and the 2 previous options is that it captures transitional kindergarten enrollment using the same methodology as the California Preschool Transitional Kindergarten and Full Day Kindergarten Facilities Grant Program. Option 3 calculates the average of the first grade, second grade, and third grade enrollment within the school district to project transitional kindergarten enrollment in each reporting year. This option provides an average estimation of the number of pupils that would have been in the transitional kindergarten grade level had those first grade, second grade, and third grade students all enrolled in transitional kindergarten and progressed through the subsequent grade levels within the school district. And there's a little bit of the math behind that right there, as well as the pros and the cons. All right, and then we'll move on to option number 4, which again is like options 1, 2, and 3 in the sense that we're going to insert that new row before the kindergarten grade level in Part A of the Form SAB 5001 to capture the transitional kindergarten enrollment. Option 4 combines the approaches of options 2 and 3 by calculating transitional kindergarten using the linear weighted average calculation and also using the cohort survival method for calculating grades grades kindergarten through 12, which is like how it's done in option 2. Similar to option 3, option 4 uses the same methodology as the California California Preschool Transitional Kindergarten and Full Day Kindergarten Facilities Grant Program for deriving the transitional kindergarten enrollment. Option 4 will also do the same thing as option 3 and create an average estimation of the number of pupils that would have been in the transitional grade level had the students or had the school district's first grade, second grade, and third grade students all enrolled in transitional kindergarten and continued their attendance through the subsequent grade levels within the school district. So here is some information on that with the table and the pros and the cons. All right, and then we'll move on to option number 5, which is different than options 1 through 4. This one, we are proposing an alternative approach by extracting out the transitional kindergarten pupils from the kindergarten grade level and adopting the methodology that is currently being used for our special day class pupils. So the actual transitional kindergarten enrollment for the current reporting year is going to be entered into a dedicated section that is only going to be for the transitional kindergarten enrollment, which will be entirely separate from Part A of the form SAB 5001. So that is the option there for option number 5. And you can see a little bit of the breakdown right there for how the SDC projections work in terms of the math. And then you can also see down there as well the results that we got and the pros and the cons for option number 5. And then finally, for option number 6, this is the keeping the status quo here. So we're going to leave the form SAB 5001 as it's currently being used if this option were to be the one that is chosen. Transitional kindergarten and kindergarten enrollment are reported as a combined number, just like they are. And this option makes no changes to the current form or the enrollment projection methodology from how it's being used currently. Right, and then I want to just thank you all for taking the time to listen to our proposals for the potentially amending the Form SAB 5001 here. We now open up the conversation to any feedback from our stakeholders on the methodologies that were out today.
Thank you, Nick. This is another technical subject. There's a lot of math here. We thought long and hard about how to present this item, and to be totally honest with you, I think everybody would have glazed over if we went into all the linear regression and all the different things that are happening in like the cohort survival projection. I would encourage you all to think about this in more of conceptual, as a concept of how we should approach this best. and how it would best capture the enrollment, and to consider, like Nick mentioned, that there is currently, at least from what I know, a lot of you might have a lot better intel than I do, but it seems like districts have a lot of variability in their TK enrollment right now. I don't know if that'll change over time as it becomes, a lot more prominent. I know that there's a lot of districts that have full TK enrollment right now, and there's a lot that have barely any. So um, I'm really a fan of separating out that TK enrollment and not having it spill into the K through 12 projection the way that we're all used to, and just accounting for it on its own. I think that's conceptually, that seems like a good approach to me. So I encourage you all to think about it in those terms. I know anybody can go back and look at a specific district, or one of your clients, or one of your high school attendance areas or something, and look at what method is best, for numbers wise. But we do have to implement a statewide policy on this, a statewide approach for everyone. And so I encourage you to look at it more of a concept than the way it applies to an individual district. So I don't know if you want to go back and look at any of these again. We're happy to talk about them in more detail. Um, really the differences, aside from separating out the TK enrollment on its own, are how do we report that TK enrollment? It's either exact TK, just the way it's reported in your CalPads over to CDE, or there's that kind of reverse projection method that we've used in the FDK expanded program, the preschool transitional kindergarten, full day kindergarten program that has worked for that program. In this program, we have the luxury of having, precise enrollment. So we can go back and get that enrollment. From what I understand, DataQuest has it for the last 4 years now. So we have that information available to us, and I think we should probably be using it the best we can. So with that, I'll open it up to Lori.
Hey, my mind's blown right now. So it's gonna take me some time to go through all these different options. But yeah, I do have a couple of districts I'd like to apply some of these examples to and kind of understand what the impacts are. But my question is, depending on what option is recommended, how is that going to work for prior year impacts? Because whatever option OPSC goes with, it's going to affect the historical cohort, right? And so how does OPSC think that this is going to work for any projects moving forward versus maybe what's happened in the more recent past when you're doing, the prior 3 year or 7 year?
Sure. Yeah. So whatever we end up going with, sorry, Josh, didn't mean to jump in there. Whatever we end up going with, whatever option we end up altering the form or not altering the form to accommodate for TK, we would still look at the comparison of the last 50-01 we have on file and do the corresponding adjustment. As we pointed out, and I'll share here a little bit, the change, especially for some of these options, like option 1 in particular right now, it's pretty nominal, I would say. I mean, it depends on which case you're looking at, whether it's a larger district or small district. But the change is minimal. And I'd say because we're using actual TK enrollment and we're isolating that linear projection for that grade level only, and then adding it to the K6, it's accounting for it correctly. You're accounting for the TK kids individually. There's no change to what we're doing for K through 6 or K through 12. And so it's really just taking that TK grade level out, approaching it the same way kindergarten is currently projected, and then adding it to that K6 enrollment. So to me, that removes that issue I was talking about earlier of having all this variance, between districts that have, maybe their TK enrollment's going up and down. Maybe it's very low, or maybe it's normal. But whatever it is, you're accounting for it individually. And so I think that, conceptually, to me anyway, my brain tells me that's logical. And as you can see, the ending change of it is pretty minimal. I mean, 6 or 9% one way or another is significant, but it's, for the most part, it's pretty level.
Yeah, I think the challenge that in my mind I'm having is when you make the adjustments for any applications that were funded over the past, 2 or 3 years, including the TK into the K number had a certain effect on that eligibility. And so if you now retract it or pull it back and you had an application that was funded, that might negatively impact any positive eligibility moving forward. I just think there
It
has to
could.
be an adjustment on both sides some way. I'm not sure.
I hear what you're saying. I don't think we would go back and change the way it was previously reported. Those were what was under the rules, what were in effect at the time, approved by the board and so forth. And there might have been applications funded off of those 5001s. But I hear what you're saying. I think what you're advocating for is option 6, Lori, if I'm reading between the lines.
Okay.
So yeah, that's what option 6 would do, is just leave things the way they are right now. So
Got it. Okay, so I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna adjust this. I'm gonna apply it to some of our clients, and I'll follow up with some written comments.
sounds great. Thank you. Rob Murray.
Yep. Hi, good morning, everyone.
Morning.
So, yeah, I'm going to echo what Lori said, and certainly we're going to be excited to run some specific real world examples and probably get back to you. But one question I had is, say for a small school district that under the new Prop 2 regulations submits right now with the current methodology and has a 5-year lock, just confirming that regardless of what potential updates to these regulations are put in place, that 5-year lock would still be valid with the current methodology.
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
we're not going to go back and alter anything.
Yeah, and then the second follow-up question is looking particularly at option 5 with kind of like SDC is reporting TK out separately, but TK through 6 would still be its own window of eligibility. So I guess I'm not quite sure what we're getting at reporting a separate TK projection if it's just going to get rolled into the rest of the K6 eligibility.
Well, so how this would work was we would look at part A the same way we do currently. It would have no change, and then instead of inserting TK as its own row or incorporating it along with kindergarten, we would just look at it separately, and we would apply the way that we would project it is the same way we project SDC enrollment currently, and so just be adopting that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that whatever that TK determined projection using the SDC methodology is determined to be as an outcome. One extra deviation to the form 5001 would be that we would need to then add that SDC calculated for process for the TK into your K6, if that's what I think you were alluding to on the question.
Yeah,
it wouldn't exclude it from there. It would just be a different way of calculating specifically that isolated TK to then be added to what the projection was for your K6 enrollment.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense.
Thanks for asking.
While we can wait, Rob, did you have another question? Just double checking.
I think he just didn't put his hand down.
Okay. It looks like we have a question in the room.
All right, here we go. Jessica.
Hi, this is Jessica Love. I really appreciate this presentation. I like all the math. You guys know I like numbers, so I know this is a lot of work putting it together. I just wanted to verify that you guys were looking at 1920 to 2122 enrollment to do the different options.
That is correct. We did actually take, as you can tell by the tables, we took 6 actual 5001s that were processed for districts using their real numbers in coordination with DataQuest CBED's information to get those TK numbers. We used real examples on these, trying to make sure we had a deviation spread across the different types. So you can see some of the samples that were obviously identified as small schools, even to kind of see what those impacts were. But those were the enrollment numbers that were used. They were real numbers from 5001s that we extracted in order to do these math calculations.
Okay. So it was before AB 130 went into play, right? So it was kind of before the TK enrollment has begun increasing. So I was just wondering if the options were going to be redone using more current numbers.
That's a good thought. We could do that for our second item. We can incorporate some newer data points and look at the rate of change the same way we did in this item.
Okay. Yeah, because like especially I think number 2 that might take down like the drastic increase. Like if you're looking, because as we get closer to 25, 26, those TK numbers are hopefully going to get closer to the kinder numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I do like separating it out too. I don't know. I like all the options. Appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Definitely something to kind of keep in mind too. Talking while we wait and see if we have any additional questions. As I mentioned, these were actual 5001s, so we used real numbers to do these calculations and provide these options and what the outcome and results might look like. Keeping in mind that currently under statute and education code, TK is identified as the first year of a 2-year kindergarten program. It is one of those things that we see a little bit of influx, hence the need and the successful incorporation of the full day kindergarten program. Currently, up until the last couple of years, DataQuest, so the CBED's reporting, just combined that TK that was reported on CalPads for school districts into the kindergarten number. So even though some of these reported samples are predating that separation out that kind of took place, those TK numbers were already in there. These were, again, you're looking at the option 6, that was what it was. They were combined into that kindergarten enrollment and already kind of captured in how the projection worked. These are just proposals to separate that out.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, for those of you, this is a fun fact. For those of you that are interested in complaining about all the algebra that's in our regulations, Jessica was partly responsible for that. She was around at OPSC when we created those, and I believe she was in the team, if I remember correctly. Lori, follow-up question.
Yes, so if any of these options move forward, that's not option 6. When would this become effective? Because we do have a couple of new construction applications on the workload list. Would those possibly be affected? Because that means I have a lot of work to try to figure out if those applications.
You have to wait until the regulations get approved by Office of Administrative Law to actually implement the form changes. It kind of depends on when we wrap these meetings up. Those are the OAL approvals happen on a quarterly basis. And so, if I'm just kind of ballparking, it'd probably be later this year. I don't know an exact date. It really just depends on, like I said, the schedule of these meetings, when we finish them, and then when we can get it to the SAB for approval and get it over to OAL for that process to take place. So maybe fourth quarter of this year, possibly early next year. I doubt the third quarter would come into play, but you never know.
Okay, so if we have an application on the workload list, but it doesn't come up for processing until February of next year, would
likely have to update it.
Update it with this newer process.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, there's one in the chat, and I understand there's one more in the room. Let's take the one in the room.
Thank you. Hi, Brian. Rebecca Clean with Cash. Thank you so much for all the work that you all have done on this item. It's very complicated. Like Jessica, I thought the math was fun. I'm like, oh, I don't think I ever did an enrollment projection by hand, and this is cool to see how it works. One of the things that I've been thinking about is building off what Jessica was talking about. We don't have full implementation of TK until the next fall. So 25-26 is when we've got full implementation. So if we're looking at the 3 prior years of historical enrollment, we're not going to have a good picture of where we're going to land at full implementation on TK with the current year and then the 3 prior years of enrollment until 28-29. So I'm thinking, do we need a way to bridge to that full implementation plus full 3 years of historical data? Do we need a proxy for that? Do we need to look at maybe running these calcs with what do we get when we use current TK and then we use that for the 3 prior years as well? What do we get if we use K as the proxy? Because presumably those kids would have potentially come through the TK line. So I'm just thinking it's hard to evaluate the options because some of those are based on the very first year of expanded TK when we were only at, say, 25% of the full program. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense. Definitely understand that. There have been some questions and comments even internally as we worked to drafting this item. How might that impact look? One thing that we are open to, and again, the purpose of these meetings is to solicit that feedback. So please continue to keep them coming. We really appreciate it. There would be potentially options to even if there wasn't an adoption of a specific calculation methodology, to align it with maybe a future enrollment year, whether that falls in the 25-26 full implementation of the TK process, or in order to allow for the subsequent years to be accurately reflected and counted and reported. Maybe it's the 26-27 year. Those are options. We are just looking through some of this math based on some feedback from stakeholders in the past of, hey, how do we handle this TK enrollment, this new process? And these are just a couple of those proposals. So still open to that discussion for sure. A couple of things to keep in mind as we look through these calculations. I'm sure you'll all be definitely knee deep in math for the next couple of days as you evaluate this process. One of the biggest goals of the purpose of bringing this item is to ensure that what we're doing is looking at what is the most realistic, most effective calculation. What is going to be the most reflective of my need as a district when I'm trying to, project what my capacity need is as I plan my projects. So look at those equations and those concepts to see what is most realistic to my district and my needs.
Yeah, I would definitely say that, Josh. That's I think the number one thing to keep in mind, and kind of what I was trying to get at when I said look at this conceptually more than anything else, because it's easy to pick the calculation that ends up with the highest number. It's not always going to be the case that that's the best way to do it. And so, our item outlines everything we could possibly think of in order to approach this. I would say that there's some that make a lot more sense to me, and I have a lot of experience in this program. I think I think I can say that I kind of understand how this all works, and there's some of them I think make a lot more sense logically on how to approach this. So I encourage you to consider this in concepts.
Yeah, and Brian, I appreciate that. I'm definitely a conceptual person and not a math person. But maybe running another calculation on these, just using the 24-25 TK enrollment, and let's say it's 50 kids, you use that for current year, and then you also use that for the 3 prior historical, and see what you get in the math on some of these options.
Yeah, I hear you on that one, and I totally agree. And maybe this is also a consideration for maybe we don't roll this process out immediately. Maybe we delay it a little bit. That's something else we can think about too, until the TK takes full grip. And that, to be totally transparent, that's why we haven't brought this item forward until now.
Yeah.
We know it's been rolling out and becoming kind of a newer thing, and so we wanted some time for it to see how it developed. So
yeah, but I really appreciate you looking at this because we agree that this is really important, because it will have an effect on the rest of the enrollment projection. So thank you.
absolutely. Thanks for your comments. Emily has a question in the chat. Will the 5001 include a separate TK outcome for part 1 of projected enrollment section, or will the TK outcomes be included in the K-6 group? That's a great question. It's our intention to combine it with the K-6 enrollment. So regardless of how we end up projecting TK, whether it's as part of an overall TK through 12 projection, or whether it's an individual projection or done SDC, however we end up doing it, that number will be reflected in the it's going to actually be updated to say TK through 6, but it'll be updated. It'll be including in that number. So, for example, if we picked option 1, we would project TK individually and then add it to the K-6 projection for a total projection that includes all those grade levels. All right. Any other questions today? It's a lot of technical stuff. So take your time, go back and look at it. We'll accept comments until March 7th. I don't know exactly when we'll be bringing this topic back, but it'll probably be roughly 6 weeks. And in the meantime, like I said, if you have comments, send them in to us. We'll do our best to address them all, and all the questions that we discussed today will also be reflected in our next item. Steve's asking when the next stakeholder meeting is. It's actually going to be on, I believe it's March 6th. And I think that's correct. And we're going to be talking about seismic mitigation and facility hardship program regulations, I believe, at that time. We had one meeting on that topic last year around June, and we're bringing it back to revisit that topic at the next meeting. Sarah, comments for this meeting are due by March 7th, and I believe from last week's meeting, you have until next Thursday. Yeah, so about one more week on the other from the one from last week. Really appreciate everybody being here today again. It's been nice to see you all so often, and we're going to be continuing this through the spring and maybe even into early summer to make sure that we get everything from Prop 2 implemented, and then a few other topics we have, such as these today. We have some other stuff too. We have that we're bringing forward. Like I mentioned, the size mitigation and facility hardship program. We have some general regulation cleanup we're bringing forward, and we're going to be continuing the topics that we've introduced so far. Thank you, Jamie. Okay, seeing no other questions. Again, we really appreciate everybody's participation. Thanks to those of you that made the trip over to the building. Yeah, we're going to be wrapping up here, and we'll see you guys in about 2 weeks. Thank you, everyone.
Definitely appreciate it. Look forward to the comments. Please remember from last week's meeting, get those in by the end of next week, and for this one by March 7th. Thank you.